Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas hits a last-minute speed bump. Both sides are blaming each other. Meanwhile, civilians caught in the middle continue to hope for the best. Jason Perry reports. On Capitol Hill, Democrats press President-elect Trump's nominees for Treasury Secretary and EPA Administrator. Luis Martinez has the key takeaways from today's Senate confirmation hearings. Will TikTok go dark in 3 days? Trump now reportedly considering saving it, while concerns remain over the app's control under the Chinese Communist Party. Iris Tao has the latest in the debate. President Biden wrapping up his final days in office with a Defense Department farewell ceremony. And Vice President Kamala Harris adds her name to a tradition that's been happening for at least 32 years. Jason Blair brings us more from D.C. The Eaton fire is not only displacing families, but also their pets. Pasadena Humane is stepping in to shelter and care for hundreds of affected animals by the blaze. Christina Corona in Los Angeles.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. The ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas that was announced yesterday now appears to be in limbo. Israel has accused Hamas of making last-minute changes to the agreement. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Just a day after the announcement of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer made this statement about the agreement.
The Prime Minister's office has made clear that Hamas have reneged on this hostage release agreement and has created a last-minute crisis in an effort to extort last-minute concessions.
And he said one of the last-minute changes Hamas wanted was for Israeli forces to pull away from the Philadelphia corridor, which is the Gaza Strip's border with Egypt. Israel has said it's important to have troops there to prevent weapons from being smuggled to Hamas. The last-minute change could postpone the start of the ceasefire, which was set to begin on Sunday, January 19th.
As such, the Israeli cabinet cannot meet to agree this deal. It cannot convene until the mediators notify Israel that Hamas has accepted all elements of the agreement that were already agreed.
On the other hand, a senior member of the Hamas terrorist group denied the claims about wanting last-minute changes and said they fully agreed to the deal that was announced on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he wasn't surprised by the last-minute issue.
A process and a negotiation that has been this challenging and this fraught. You may get a loose end. We're tying up that loose end as we speak. I'm very confident that this is moving forward, and we'll see the start of implementation of the agreement on Sunday.
One man whose cousin's body was taken to the Gaza Strip during the terrorist attack on October 7th shared his thoughts on the situation.
First of all, even though Trump said the deal is sealed, it hasn't been yet. And for us, when we have seen so many disappointments over these past 15 months, you know, if this saying were ever true, I'll believe it when I see it.
And a displaced resident in the Gaza Strip shared his thoughts.
We became optimistic about that situation, and we slept happily and had hope. And then suddenly we learned today about that news, and it was a shock to us.
The Israeli Prime Minister's office said in a statement on Thursday that the Israeli cabinet will not convene until the mediators notify Israel that Hamas has accepted all elements of the agreement. Jason Perry, NTD News.
It's day 3 of confirmation hearings, which so far have been a formality, with Republican senators publicly backing Trump's nominees. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has the latest from Capitol Hill.
4 more of President Trump's nominees faced confirmation hearings this Thursday. Scott Bessent, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of the Treasury, urged senators to extend that Trump-era tax cuts. Otherwise, the U.S. economy might face calamity.
Today, I believe that President Trump has a generational opportunity to unleash a new economic golden age that will create more jobs, wealth, and prosperity for all Americans.
Former New York Congressman Lee Selden, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of the Environmental Protection Agency, faced strong opposition from Democrats.
I must say that his role at polluter-funded organizations such as the America First Policy Institute and America First Works, his long list of Trump-affiliated consulting clients, and his anti-climate op-eds paid for by dark money organizations do not give me confidence that he will be an honest broker if confirmed to lead EPA.
If confirmed, I pledge to enthusiastically uphold the EPA's mission. I will foster a collaborative culture within the agency, supporting career staff who have dedicated themselves to this mission. I strongly believe we have a moral responsibility to be good stewards of our environment for generations to come.
On Thursday, Senate Democrats maintained their strong opposition to the nomination of Pam Bondi for next U.S. Attorney General. During today's hearing, senators pressed character witnesses on Pam Bondi's involvement in election fraud claims dating back to 2021.
Reports about her being very equivocal about acknowledging that Joe Biden legitimately was elected president in 2020, that would raise a major red flag with me if she's buying into bogus conspiracy theories about that election.
Let me tell you what I make of it, because I was at the hearing. Number one, the Democrats are out of material for Pam Bondi if they're spending time talking about Kash Patel. And number two, they're weaving a false narrative that when he comes before the nomination hearing, we'll be busted. Media's going to have to come up with a new way to define him.
Doug Burgum, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Interior Secretary, and Scott Turner, the nominee for HUD Secretary, also received their confirmation hearings on Thursday. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
From working in the private sector to managing the nation's economic priorities, what did it take for Scott Bessent to become President-elect Trump's first choice to lead the Treasury Department? NTD's Sam Wong has details on the life and career of the business tycoon.
Having made his name as a Wall Street billionaire, business tycoon Scott Bessent on Thursday spoke before the Senate Finance Committee about his vision for America's top economic priorities.
I believe that President Trump has a generational opportunity to unleash a new economic golden age that will create more jobs, wealth, and prosperity for all Americans.
Bessent was handpicked by President-elect Trump to oversee the Treasury Department. If confirmed by the Senate, he's expected to implement Trump's agenda on tariffs, tax cuts, and deregulation, with the goal of preserving the American dollar as the world's reserve currency.
We must secure supply chains that are vulnerable to strategic competitors, and we must carefully deploy sanctions as part of a whole-of-government approach to address our national security requirements.
But prior to his alliance with Trump, Bessent was actively involved in various liberal causes. He donated to Al Gore's presidential campaign in the early 2000s and also served as a hedge fund manager for billionaire George Soros, a prominent donor to Democrats. But during the height of the 2024 presidential race, Bessent was a top donor, fundraiser, and key economic advisor for the Trump campaign. He soon became one of several candidates for Trump's Treasury pick, contending with private equity billionaire Mark Rowan and Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick. Lutnick was later tapped to be Trump's Commerce Secretary.
So you believe that President Trump's policies will further increase wages and lower inflation?
I believe that they will increase real wages and lower inflation closer to the Federal Reserve's 2% target, as it did during President Trump's first administration.
Once confirmed, Bessent is set to face numerous challenges, including managing the IRS and the national debt, which currently sits at a staggering $36 trillion. Sam Wong, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
And Trump appointing 3 special ambassadors to Hollywood, California. Trump said in a Truth Social post today that actors Jon Voight, Mel Gibson, and Sylvester Stallone will serve as special envoys for him on Hollywood. The goal is to make Hollywood, quote, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. Trump called Hollywood a great but very troubled place, saying it has lost much business over the last 4 years to foreign countries. Trump said, quote, it will again be like the United States of America itself, the golden age of Hollywood. President-elect Trump is reportedly weighing executive actions to stop the Chinese app TikTok from soon getting banned in the U.S. But some GOP lawmakers say no concession should be made, as the CCP is determined to spy on Americans. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
And President-elect Trump, who's taken office one day after TikTok is set to be banned, is reportedly considering an executive order to suspend the ban's enforcement for 2 to 3 months. The move, reported by the Washington Post, would mean that TikTok could get more time to find an American buyer. It comes as Democratic leadership on Thursday say they want to work with Trump to buy TikTok more time.
And I will work with the Trump administration and with both parties to keep TikTok alive while protecting our national security.
Despite Trump recently saying TikTok has earned him young voter support, he supported a ban during his first administration, citing national security concerns. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Tom Cotton says the risk remains real and that no concession should be given to a Chinese spy app.
There will be no extensions, no concessions, and no compromises for TikTok. ByteDance and the Chinese communists had plenty of time to make a deal. Instead, TikTok whined, lied, complained, sued, and lobbied. Oh, how they lobbied.
Senator Cotton, who's the chair of the Intel Committee, on Wednesday blocked Democrats from extending the deadline for TikTok to be sold. And Cotton adds that the Chinese Communist Party is urging its U.S. users to speak out for TikTok, which is
a foreign power egging them on, meddling in our politics, influencing our legislative debates.
Documents have revealed that TikTok leadership reports into Beijing and that the app censors content critical of China and harvests data from Americans. The Supreme Court this week suggested that threats posed by the company's connections to China override its arguments about free speech. Unless the Supreme Court intervenes by Sunday, TikTok is set to disappear from app stores the day before Trump takes office. And even if it finds a U.S. buyer by Sunday, it will still need to go through a legal review to make sure that China retains no residual influence over the company or its algorithm. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
With Trump set to take office in just a few days, here's a look at his official inaugural portrait and that of Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Trump's chief photographer released the images on social media yesterday with the caption, "We are entering the golden age of America." Both Trump and Vance will take the oath of office Monday in Washington, D.C. And in just a few days, we'll bring you round-the-clock coverage of the second inauguration of Donald Trump. Watch it on January 20th, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll have teams at key locations bringing you into every moment of the historic and peaceful transfer of power, the inaugural parade, and closing it up with the inaugural balls. It's going to be a long day, and we'll be with you through it all. After giving a farewell address to the nation, President Biden is wrapping up his final days in office. Today, he delivered remarks at a farewell ceremony at the Department of Defense, and Friday, he'll be speaking to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the details.
President Biden received a farewell from the armed forces in a ceremony at the Department of Defense Thursday afternoon. Representatives from all U.S. military branches attended, as well as Vice President Kamala Harris. The event was hosted by the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Thank you, Mr. President and Dr. Biden. May God bless you and your family, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
The only nation in the world, only nation in history built on an idea that we're all created equal.
Former President Barack Obama shared a message on X honoring Biden's presidency. He says, "I'm grateful to Joe for his leadership, his friendship, and his lifetime of service to this country we love." Biden also issued an executive order taking additional steps to address, quote, malicious cyber-enabled activities against the United States and U.S. allies and partners. In a Thursday statement to Congress, Biden said significant malicious cyber-enabled activities continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. Biden's statement says this move is in accordance with a continuing national emergency and addresses increasing threats by foreign actors, including unauthorized access to critical infrastructure, ransomware, and cyber-enabled intrusions and sanctions evasion.
So I thank you all, and with that, I'm going to pull out the Sharpie.
On Thursday, Vice President Kamala Harris added her signature to the desk in the vice presidential ceremonial room. The tradition goes back to at least Vice President Dan Quayle in 1993. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Much of the United States is about to get hit with winter's most potent Arctic blast yet. Frigid temperatures from the Arctic Circle will arrive in the northern U.S. by early Saturday morning. The cold will then expand over much of the west and central U.S. on Saturday and reach parts of the south and east on Sunday. For millions across the lower 48, temperatures could be almost 30 degrees below normal by Monday, and the wind chill will make it feel even colder. A high in the upper 20s is expected in Washington, D.C. It will be the coldest inauguration day since former President Barack Obama's first inauguration in 2009, when the temperature topped out at 30 degrees. Pasadena Humane is serving as an emergency evacuation center for animals impacted by the Eaton fire. From dogs and cats to goats and even a tortoise, they've taken in hundreds of animals, providing critical care and support during this crisis. NTD's Christina Corona shares more.
With the recent wildfires, hundreds of animals are in desperate need of urgent care and shelter. We're here at the Pasadena Humane Society, where hundreds of pets and wildlife are being treated and cared for as they recover from the impact of the disaster. So far, the Pasadena Humane Society has taken in over 700 animals. Kevin McManus, the PR and communications manager at Pasadena Humane, shares what types of animals they have taken in.
And that includes everything from dogs and cats, your traditional pets, occasionally like a rabbit or a guinea pig. We've even gotten some parrots, some exotic like tortoises, and we've also taken in wildlife.
They even rescued a pig with burns on its belly, a peacock, a cockatoo, and a 5-day-old puppy that was discovered under a collapsed building. The most common injury among affected animals are burns, followed by smoke inhalation and dehydration. They have an animal ICU with several of their veterinarians and relief veterinarians from other shelters stepping in to provide care.
The first step is triage, to start treating the injuries, pain meds, fluids, and then setting up a treatment plan. A lot of the animals with smoke inhalation have to stay in the ICU because we have oxygen chambers for them to recover in.
He explained that in order to take in animals displaced by the fire, many of the shelter's existing animals were transferred to other organizations as far away as San Diego, Sacramento, and Santa Barbara. Pasadena Humane is working with the ASPCA and American Humane to send strike teams of specially trained animal control officers door-to-door in burn areas, rescuing animals left behind. And how can the community join in to help those at the Humane Society?
Well, at this point, the best way for us to help animals is by buying the very specific needs for each animal. We found that with the wide variety of people's pets that we've taken in, we have to supply them with food, proper housing, lights in some cases. So a monetary donation is the quickest and easiest way for us to really help the animals.
Donations can be made at give.pasadenahumane.org. So if you're planning to adopt or foster, be prepared to wait. The Pasadena Humane Society is processing over 20,000 applications for animals that may have not been claimed by families yet or may have been strays. Reporting from the city of Pasadena, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And some sad news from the entertainment world. Director David Lynch has died. Lynch was known for his unique and surrealistic films and TV shows, including Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, and Twin Peaks. His first feature film was the cult classic Eraserhead, which he followed up with the commercial hit The Elephant Man. Lynch's family confirmed his death via his official Facebook page, but did not provide a cause. He was 78 years old. Coming up, the British government is now supporting inquiries into the decades-old grooming gang scandal. The issue returned to the spotlight after criticism from billionaire Elon Musk. Arian Pozdar has the update. Ukraine and Britain sign a 100-year partnership treaty seeking to strengthen bonds in a post-war future. This comes just days before Trump's second presidency and an expected shift in U.S. policy toward the war. Malcolm Hudson brings us more from London after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The British government will provide support for local inquiries into the so-called grooming gang scandal. This comes after Parliament voted against opening a national inquiry just last week. The scandal returned to the spotlight after criticism from billionaire Elon Musk. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest.
Britain's government has announced support for local probes into the so-called grooming gang scandal. The scandal involved organized groups of men, mostly from Pakistan, raping young girls in English towns. Britain's Home Secretary made this announcement on Thursday.
To instigate a rapid review to uncover the prevalence of this appalling crime across the country.
The decades-old issue came back into the spotlight after criticism from billionaire Elon Musk. For example, this tweet in which he reacted to an article that said Rotherham dads were arrested after tracking down abusers. Musk replied, writing that whoever ordered the arrest of fathers trying to protect their daughters from gang rape should be in prison for life. Thursday's plan by Britain's government includes implementing the recommendations of a national inquiry published in 2022 and backing new local investigations. A member of parliament who's with the Reform Party criticized the fact that he can't get basic information on the perpetrators of the attacks.
How many Pakistani or other foreign rapists have been deported, are still in prison, did not serve a custodial sentence? The response: the requested information is not centrally identified in the data systems relevant to these questions.
He added that, in contrast, private companies would face consequences if they weren't able to provide simple data. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
Britain is building on its pledges to continue supporting Ukraine, now with a 100-year treaty to create a strong partnership after any peace deal is negotiated with Russia. This strengthened backing comes days before an expected shift in U.S. policy on the war with President-elect Trump's inauguration. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more from London.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has pledged to help guarantee Ukraine's security for a century, offering Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a 100-year partnership deal. This is Starmer's first trip to Ukraine since becoming Prime Minister last year, and he's keen to offer Britain's continued support ahead of President-elect Trump's return to the White House.
And I'm proud to speak for the whole of the United Kingdom when I say, we are with you, not just today or tomorrow, for this year or the next, but for 100 years, long after this terrible war is over, and Ukraine is free and thriving once again.
The 100-year partnership treaty will cover areas including defence, science, energy and trade. It also makes the UK a preferred partner for Ukraine's critical minerals strategy. Russia has captured 2 of Ukraine's 4 lithium mines, which potentially impacts Europe's access to the material critical for electric car batteries and other green technologies. According to geological surveys, Ukraine has an estimated 500,000 tons of untapped lithium. Starmer also said his current focus was on ensuring Kiev's forces were in the strongest possible position on the battlefield.
The route to a just and lasting peace comes through strength. We will work with allies to reject this aggression, uphold international law, and strengthen your hand now.
The UK has been one of Ukraine's biggest military backers, so far pledging $16 billion in military and civilian aid, though this sum is dwarfed by Washington's $63.5 billion. Trump's return to the White House could mean a potential shift in US support for Ukraine's war efforts. This in favor of a push for a peace deal. Trump's pick for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, suggested on Wednesday that both Ukraine and Russia would have to make concessions to end the war. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Canada's ruling Liberal Party is looking for a new leader to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Liberal Party will pick a new chief on March 9th. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details on some potential contenders.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced he intended to step down earlier this month. Now the country's Liberal Party has to pick a new leader. One possible candidate is former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland.
We are clear that we are insulted as a country, and we are absolutely clear in making a firm and strong response is when we face illegal and unjustified actions from another country.
Freeland unexpectedly resigned in December after an argument over spending. Here she is speaking in 2018.
When people feel their economic future is in jeopardy, when they believe their children have fewer opportunities than they themselves had in their youth, that's when people are vulnerable to the demagogue who scapegoats the outsider, the other, whether it's immigrants at home or trading partners abroad.
Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney is the only major candidate who is not part of the Trudeau government. Carney's name has been circulating for years as a potential Liberal leader, largely thanks to his financial credentials. In 2013, he took over as governor of the Bank of England, becoming the first person to ever head two major central banks. Another contender is Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, who served as Environment Minister from 2019 to 2021. Wilkinson has defended the oil and gas industry amid efforts to cut emissions. Here he is in 2023.
We released our updated modeling for the wildfire season. It is, in a word, sobering. It shows that the risk of wildfires is set to increase in June and remain unusually high throughout the summer across the country.
The Liberal Party will pick a new chief on March 9th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody will fill Marco Rubio's seat in the Senate. Trump faces a mountain of challenges as he prepares for a second term, from global conflicts to rising inflation at home. How will his administration tackle these critical issues? Chris Spears sits down with a senior policy analyst for a closer look at what's ahead after the break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. The office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that a last-minute dispute with Hamas has been holding up Israeli approval of the ceasefire deal. Netanyahu's cabinet has yet to meet to vote on the agreement, accusing Hamas of reneging on parts of the deal. Senate committees held confirmation hearings for more of President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees. They include Pam Bondi for Attorney General, Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary, and Lee Zeldin for Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. Trump's pick for National Security Advisor said the president-elect is exploring options to preserve TikTok. This came as Trump announced 3 special ambassadors to Hollywood with the goal of bringing back business to the U.S. entertainment industry. President Biden issued an executive order aimed at strengthening the nation's cybersecurity. The order makes it easier to go after foreign adversaries or hacking groups that try to compromise U.S. internet and communication systems. President-elect Trump will have his hands full when he gets back into office, from wars in the Middle East and Europe to inflation and economic frustration at home. For a closer look at the key issues Trump will face and how he'll face them, NTD's Chris Spears spoke with senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum and Steamboat Institute Blankley Fellow, Carrie Sheffield.
Busy. That's what soon-to-be President Trump will be when he officially becomes the president Monday. He and his second administration are stepping into a slew of issues, both foreign and domestic. On the campaign trail, he claimed he would end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office, but that was on the campaign trail. The Israel-Gaza hostage release he demanded could be on the rocks. I spoke with policy analyst Carrie Sheffield about these issues, starting with the Middle East peace deal, which Israel claims is jeopardized by Hamas.
The thing about Hamas is they don't like to honor agreements, and that's the concern from Israel here.
Israel says Hamas tried to make last-minute changes to the peace deal that the world was celebrating yesterday, including President Biden and President-elect Trump. The Jewish state claims Hamas created a last-minute crisis.
I think that Netanyahu is very wary of Hamas because its founding charter wants to destroy Israel and basically says it should not be allowed to exist. Obviously, I'm hoping for a deal. I know the world is hoping for a deal. The fact that Trump has said all hell will break loose unless the hostages are returned.
We'll see if the hostage release deal will come through and if the hell Trump promised will indeed happen. Sheffield pointed out that negotiations sped up around the time Trump won the presidential race.
I have a lot more hope that Trump will be successful with this. I think Trump will be able to leverage his relationships not only with Israel but with the surrounding Arab nations in order to pressure Hamas to come to the table.
As for Europe, February will mark 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers are presumed dead, and there are few signs the bloodshed will cease.
Trump does not want the U.S. to get into foreign entanglements. I think the negotiation for what will end up being a peace agreement with Ukraine and Russia. Right now, Ukraine really has limited leverage in the sense that they've been so reliant on Western support.
The U.S. has been Ukraine's largest backer, providing over $60 billion in military aid since the war began in 2022. Trump says, "It's a war that I'm going to try really to stop as quickly as I can," but his method for doing so might not appease those who want to see Putin withdraw from Ukraine.
I think Ukraine will probably end up having to sign over some of its territory. But, I think the Ukrainian people are exhausted. And as much as I think that Putin is a war criminal, the world is a broken place. And so I think that Trump wants to lower bloodshed at the end of the day.
As for finance, the economy was the #1 issue in the 2024 election. Inflation is down from this century's high of 9% in 2022, but the average American is still pressed by price increases. Here's how Sheffield thinks Trump might address the situation.
The two most important things that Trump has on his agenda right now are tax reform and regulatory reform as it relates to the economy. And then the DOGE Commission, which is related to those.
Cutting regulations could stimulate economic growth, and the Department of Government Efficiency could reduce government spending and thereby inflation. Chris Beers, NTD News.
And now to Florida, where Governor Ron Desantis has made his choice to replace Senator Marco Rubio when he leaves office to become Secretary of State. Desantis today picked Ashley Moody, the state's Attorney General, for the spot.
In true governorship fashion, he gave me a mere couple of hours to figure out what I was going to say to you. But that is because he is deliberate and takes nothing lightly and understands the importance of this role. Governor, I want you to know I will not let you down. I will not let the citizens of Florida down, and I will not let my country down.
Rubio was picked by Trump to serve as the top U.S. diplomat and is expected to easily win confirmation in the Senate. DeSantis said Moody could be sworn in as soon as Monday afternoon, shortly after Trump takes office. Coming up in tennis, a major upset down under as an American teenager advances to the Australian Open. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin successfully test launches its new mega rocket. The company getting a step closer to competing with SpaceX in the satellite launch business. More on that when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Martin now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start with some sad news in baseball as former player, announcer, comedian, and actor Bob Uecker passed away at age of 90. What was he best known for?
You know, it probably depended on your age. You know, his playing career was actually very short and somewhat undistinguished. 6 years for 4 teams in the major leagues as a backup catcher. This is back in the 1960s. Hit 14 career home runs. And he joked about his playing days really all the time, though. Like the best way to catch a knuckleball was to wait for it to stop rolling and then pick it up. Or how his 2 career highlights were an intentional walk from Sandy Koufax, and getting out of a rundown with against the Mets. Now, after he retired, this is 1967, he became a comedian. He was on the Johnny Carson show more than 100 times. He also became a broadcaster for the Milwaukee Brewers. This is like 1971. He was in all those Miller Lite beer commercials. He started in a TV series in the 80s called Mr. Belvedere. I would still say his most famous role was in the movie Major League, where he's the announcer for that terrible Cleveland Indians team. I mean, his quips in the movie still make me laugh. He's like, just a bit outside. Meanwhile, the ball is like 10 feet off home plate. Through it all, though, he was still part of the Brewers broadcasting team. He was then in the 1990s, he was on the World Series broadcasting team along with Bob Costas and Joe Morgan. Very popular figure. In fact, there's 2 statues of him at the Milwaukee's ballpark. So a very sad day for baseball fans.
Well, shifting gears to golf, Tiger Woods' TGL debut Tuesday night drew just over 1 million viewers. That's despite his team's lopsided loss. How does that compare to the inaugural match last week?
Yeah, it's about 10% more than they drew actually last week for their first match. Now, this aired on ESPN, and the amount of viewers that watched the Duke-Miami basketball game that followed that were actually about half of this, just to give you an idea of comparison also. I think we'll have a better idea next week of how popular this league will be. I mean, they're bound to have good numbers from the inaugural event last week, everyone to see what it's all about. This time you had Tiger Woods as the main attraction. He only played in 5 sanctioned PGA events last year, and the final was in July. Now, I've said before how much I like the guys being mic'd up. You really get to know them. I think this team play has some positives, but it's kind of tough to be attached to these like New York or LA teams if they all play in the same facility in Florida, of course. But I think they definitely seem to have something here, though.
Looking at tennis news, a 19-year-old became the youngest American to reach the 3rd round of the Australian Open. That's since Pete Sampras back in 1990. That's after upsetting Daniel Medvedev Thursday.
Yeah, Lerner Tien from California beat Medvedev in a 5-set shocker that took nearly 5 hours to complete. In fact, it ended just before 3 a.m. local time. This is, of course, in Melbourne, Australia. Quite a match. There was actually a 6-minute rain delay late in the 5th set. Tien was serving at 5-all, really almost for the match. When they resumed, though, Medvedev broke him. He then served for the match at 6-5. Amazingly, though, Tien broke back, so they went to a tiebreaker, which Tien won 10-7 to win the match. This is like 3 a.m. That was 2 hours after Tien had his first match point, which Medvedev obviously saved, because Tien won the first 2 sets. The 3rd set also went to a tiebreaker, very close there. So it was quite a back and forth match. But Tien's first Grand Slam match victories were actually this week. Meanwhile, Medvedev, I mean, he won the U.S. Open 3 years ago. He's finished runner-up at this event 3 times. So this is quite the upset here.
Well, tonight in the NBA, we have a rematch between Cleveland and Oklahoma City, the teams with the top 2 records in the league. What makes these teams so good? You know, they have very contrasting styles, actually. One's probably the best defensive team in the league. The other is probably the best offensive team in the league. Cleveland averages the most points. They have the highest shooting percentage. Conversely, Oklahoma City allows the fewest points. They allow the worst shooting percentage. They met last week in quite a game. 30 lead changes. The Cavaliers eventually came out on top. That game was played in Cleveland. Tonight, it's going to be in Oklahoma City. I think most people believe this is going to be a finals preview. Anyway, it tips off 7:30 Eastern Time on TNT tonight, so be sure to watch it. Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
Blue Origin has taken a big step toward competing with SpaceX. It successfully launched its new 300-foot mega rocket early this morning. Take a look.
Blue Origin's giant New Glenn rocket blasted off from Florida Thursday morning.
Checking for pressures are good, people.
It was its first mission to space and a giant leap for Jeff Bezos' company as it aims to rival Elon Musk's SpaceX in the satellite launch business. New Glenn, standing at 30 stories tall with a reusable first stage, launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida. Its 7 engines thundered for miles under cloudy skies.
We got to orbit safely. Congratulations!
Hundreds of employees roared in applause when the rocket's second stage made it to orbit and achieved a long-awaited milestone. The rocket's reusable first stage booster was due to land on a barge in the Atlantic Ocean after separating from its second stage, but failed to make that landing. The mission was a culmination of a decade-long, multi-billion-dollar development journey. It marks Blue Origin's first trek to Earth's orbit in the 25 years since Bezos founded the company. Secured inside New Glenn's payload bay for the mission is the first prototype of Blue Origin's Blue Ring vehicle. It's a spacecraft the company plans to sell to the Pentagon and commercial customers for national security and satellite servicing missions. Bezos watched the launch from a few miles away in Blue Origin's mission control room. New Glenn is expected to press ahead with a backlog of dozens of missions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It includes up to 27 launches for Amazon's Kuiper satellite internet network that will rival SpaceX's Starlink service. New Glenn is the latest US rocket to debut in recent years as governments and private companies beef up their space programs.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.